ladies, there's many reasons why we have this episode today. Being a woman is hard. Being a woman means we have to move through many changes in life. So in our bodies, our minds, and our sense of self, from being a baby girl to navigating puberty and our teenage years to university and the early days of our careers. There may be then pregnancy and motherhood, or maybe not. And then later we will come to the leadership roles and menopause, reinvention, and learning who we are again as we grow older. So each stage asks something new of us. Our body changes, our identity shift. What stage are you in life at the moment as a woman?
I look at this image and I'm chuckling, but also I'm coming out in a slight sweat because for some of my age, I'm looking at menopause, but I certainly haven't got a walking stick. And I've actually just been in the gym today, and my bio age is 21, and I'm actually 51. So when it comes to stages of a woman's life, I'm really celebrating the fact that I am promoting longevity, and that's from fitness, good mindset, and good nutrition. So I was delighted to get that result today. So I'm going to share that with you. That's why I was kind of chuckling to myself looking at the menopausal stage. So I'm still in motherhood, but motherhood has changed for me because now my sons are grown up. They are 25, 22. So I am now what is known as an empty nester, which comes with lots of different emotions and feelings. But I'm also a menopausal woman because I went into surgical menopause 2 years ago. Very different experience from going into it naturally. Saying that, I'm still as incredibly driven and motivated as ever.
The ready orange lady who's in motherhood, that's me. I have a 13-year-old, but I also am apparently the lady in purple, and like Claire, through sheer perseverance and investment in myself, I do not have a walking stick. And I've got a connective tissue disorder. So I suppose it would actually, to be fair, about 3 years ago, I started briefly needing to use a walking stick. And it was one of the things that really powered my determination to get myself into a place where I felt much more well.
To be honest, if I place myself on this timeline, I'm in the early career phase, but maybe my stage like after adolescence and before motherhood. So where you are figure out like who you are in the world. So for me, this phase like has been less about having everything figured out and more about building identity through explorations.
In your generation, when you were a little girl, what messages did you absorb as a girl about who you were allowed to be? And how did that have an impact on your life and shape the woman who you are today?
My mother particularly is, I should say, to this day, she's 89 and she still works 4 days a week. So she's a hell of a resilient woman. My mother said to me, the guidance that she gave me was, if you don't want to go on to further education, then you need to get yourself a job. So that was my career advice from my mum. My dad didn't give me any. It wasn't because he didn't love me or give me the guidance, but my dad just wasn't like that, you know? So my parents they didn't force me to go down a certain route. They gave me the ability to make my own choices. And that I have to say I'm very grateful for, because from a young age, I was able to understand what I wanted, and my parents never railroaded me into a direction that wasn't fit for me. So going back to what Amelia said, I obviously did know my own identity, but again, the choice of words was very different back then. I was probably just given the freedom to be who I am. And I look at my brothers and I look at my sister, and we're all very different, and we went sort of different ways. But I took that advice on, or that guidance from my mum. I went to sixth form college for 2 months. Didn't like it because I thought I'm done with education. I'm very much a creative person, so being stuck in a classroom again is not how I learn, and I don't find it enjoyable at all. But my mum said, if you come out of education, you've got to get a job. So I applied for jobs in banks. Now, this is where you see a pattern because my mum worked in a bank, my elder brother worked in a bank. So for me, I thought, okay, I'll go and get a job in a bank because it was that kind of, that pattern that we'd seen and it was acceptable. Was it really an ambition of mine? Not really. However, what I do know, and I remember probably Helen can share, I'm probably slightly older than Helen, but my career advice at school was just nothing. But if I had a mentor at school who really sat down with me, just like we are doing today, and said, tell me about yourself. What do you love? I would have said fashion. That's what I would have said immediately. And then I could have been put onto the right path or where I found myself in the last 25 years in fashion. But before that, I had a career in banking for 10 years. So I don't regret any of it. This is the best thing is I have no regret because what I learned in those early banking days still are with me today. It gave me amazing customer service skills. It gave me the ability to communicate with people. It gave me my business acumen, which helped me build my own floristry business many, many years ago. So I think having that freedom from my parents and not being railroaded into something that gave me the freedom to evolve in each chapter of my life. That's exactly where I am today. A new chapter for me, but that whole experience and that evolution and reinvention have got me to where I am today.
Amazing. That's so inspiring, Claire. Like it's the whole of the journey, right? And it's very interesting to hear from you, the differences in generations, like because pretty much I think the person that we become, it doesn't matter whether you're a woman or a man, is always, impacted by, the childhood experience pretty much. There will be good things, there will be bad things, but definitely it wouldn't shape the way that you behave, the way you approach things until you kind of like you realize you kind of mature enough to realize that which ways work for you best. Actually during your generation there's a lot of things happening after the war, like for your parents' generations, like, people need to kind of like make a living. That's pretty much everything that they had to focus on. There wasn't much time just to think about other things. I think for us, when nowadays luckily we living in a peaceful world, there's no war, we have more space to think about self-development, about self-awareness. What do we actually want in life? Because like everything is possible for us nowadays, right? Like we can do whatever we want, but what we need to do is to figure out what we want. While for your generations there's so many things that you want to do, however the society, the opportunities back then, there weren't that many for you. And also for some people it really depends on family background as well, so they always have to put that as a priority. Helen?
Mine's a little bit different, similar. I definitely recognize some similarities. I feel like so I'm Gen X as well. There's really nothing between our ages, Claire. I'm 50 this year, so I'm running up behind you. I'm grateful that you're slightly ahead. I have felt like careers advice was essentially I advise you to have a career. was about the extent of the careers advice that I received. I went to school I don't know what it's like in Vietnam, but schools where I grew up in England were on a tier system. So there were selective grammar schools and comprehensive schools. And if at 13, as it was at the time, I think it's 11 now, you didn't get into the grammar school, the kind of qualifications you had the opportunity to do and the kind of careers advice you got was very different. But probably something that my parents and particularly my grandparents, I come from a farming family, and in the UK, farming families are often quite aspirational. And but we often, maybe because they have a little bit of land, so they sometimes get invited to things with the posh people. Because there's a big problem in the UK with the class system, isn't there, Claire? I mean, we will get working class women and middle class women would have been given really different. It sounds like we were both from working class backgrounds, Claire. We'd have been given really different careers advice. The girls at the grammar school probably got asked if, were you thinking of nursing or would you actually like to extend yourself to medicine? You did terribly well in your last physics exam. Whereas I was asked if I might want to work with leather randomly by an art teacher. What? Um, but luckily, so I had slightly aspirational grandparents who brought me up to be a good guest of all things. They had this idea that I must know how to eat in expensive restaurants. I don't know why. They couldn't afford to take me to them very often. But they had this real thing that we should know what cutlery to use and what shoes to wear. And my grandmother, even with things like how to cross your feet and why you don't put your elbows on the table. And I would get invited to other children's houses who were much better off than me because I behaved nicely and said please and thank you and could make conversation at the dinner table because I'd been schooled how to. And I got to see a world a little bit beyond, and I got quite excited by it. I noticed that the parents of my middle class friends, well, my middle class friends had quite big houses. My grandparents' farmhouse was a fair size because it's a farmhouse, but they had like big rambling houses with multiple floors. And they often got to work in their house, like they had an office, and they didn't seem to have to work as many hours, and they were never dirty. They never had dirty hands or dirty shoes, and they looked just less exhausted than my parents. And I remember thinking, that's for me. That's my plan. That looks a lot easier than what's laid out before me. And my parents and grandparents were supportive but baffled, I think. I think a little bit delighted and a little bit insulted because I still hadn't really internalized a lot of the social niceties. And I think I probably said to them, I reckon I could find an easier life. Looks a bit hard what you're doing. I fancy something different. And I think while they were delighted on the one hand, they might also have been a bit offended on the other, that I thought perhaps something else would be better for me. And I shared this with an English teacher who had noticed I had a bit of a thing for poetry, who encouraged me to go to university, to apply to go to university on the basis of almost no academic attainment. I don't know why he thought I could do it, but apparently he was right, because with that encouragement, I did manage to get some A levels and I was the first person in my family to ever go to university. So it was similar, Claire, because I think neither of us internalized the plan that was mapped out for us.
No, definitely. I tell you what's really interesting as well, Helen. I don't know whether you have siblings, but I have three siblings. So I'm the third in our family. And what I will have to say, we were having this conversation with my brother, and most like my sister, who are older than me, I think you'd have a different response because I think your first child has a lot of pressure on them, and then your second one as well. And by the third one, if they've given up on me, so just like do your own thing. But I think my mother always told me about that, and I was very conscious when I was raising my sons to not give them that, first and second. It was always a very, very equal and even platform.
I was the eldest. I just
Oh,
was
pressure.
I just awkward and failed to internalize. But it's been commented on many times that it's both a blessing and a curse. I don't seem to be able to internalize social expectations for myself, which is probably helpful, but also a bit of a burden.
That is your generation that I've seen. Amelia is purely Gen Z, right? I'm kind of like in the transition between millennials and Gen Z. So I think my experience is going to be pretty much similar to Amelia to a certain extent, but there will be still some differences. So I think during my generation, it was basically the start of the internet, like yahoo.com, all kind of things like that. And we got the chance to start getting, a lot of information on the internet about the world. That is when we had the internet, but we didn't, use the internet too much like nowadays. So I think Amelia will talk about this later, but I think obviously nowadays the kids have so many things, right? Like Instagram, Locket, TikTok, Facebook, and 1,000 of other things as well. And a lot of people say that, for example, Gen Zs are quite fragile, like, they can't handle the tough situations. But if we look at the world that they are living in at the moment, like they have to digest so much information every single day. For us now, everything is possible, right? And there are so many different careers that we can choose, but for us it's pretty much, it's about, there are too many options, so we are confused about which one to choose. When we were little, pretty much we are taught in a way that we have to, align to fixed role model, that people have. So being a good person or being a good child means that you have to listen to your parents. Doesn't matter if that is the thing that you like or not. You are judged by your marks, right? And then in literature, there will be certain talking points that you need to mention in your essays. If you don't mention those points and you have other ideas, you will not get any mark. Even those are good ideas, but you have to follow certain mark scheme standards that they laid out. So I think that way our kind of like imaginations is limited to a certain extent, and also at the same time we don't have a lot of opportunities to understand ourselves and express ourselves. I've seen a lot of scenarios where people are shy, and especially for girls as well, we are taught that we have to be gentle, we have to be good at certain subjects, while boys, they can be a little bit, like energetic. If they need to be good at math, like science subjects, they can try silly things and fail, and they can create a mess, and that's all right. But for girls, you have to be well behaved, you shouldn't create a mess, things like that. So that really limits our ability to, like explore different things. All those things that we experience in our education system and in our childhood, the way that we are raised, that really have an impact on the person we become. So later down the line, when we go to work, right, like there will be scenarios I have seen where my female colleagues, they are very shy, they don't talk much, they don't speak up in meetings, even though they're very good and they understand a lot of things, they have very good ideas, but the fear of being judged and being wrong, that really putting up their ideas in front of others, making them feel that their voice would not be heard. They need to listen to other people who are more senior to a certain extent, is happening in Amelia's generation. So I think,
Yeah, from my experience, because I grew up in a very interesting family dynamic in Vietnam. My mother was a preschool teacher and my dad was mechanical engineer. So there was a 20 years age gap between them. So I received like two very different worldview under one roof. If like you zoom out to Vietnam in the early 2000s, we were just transitioning from agriculture into industrialization, and gender role were still quite traditional, but there was also the new wave of opportunity. So from my father, the message was very like pragmatic. If you are a girl, you must study even harder, because his logic was that if a boy didn't study, he could like still survive by doing physical labor. But if a girl didn't study, so where would she go? That message come from love, but also from like how the system worked at that time. But my mother was very different, because at that time, I was quite quick physically as a child, so she used to say that just study enough, so don't push too hard. But when I grew older, she invested equally in my educations as my brother. Same class, same enrichment, and same expectations. And I'm grateful that neither of them taught me that being a girl not mean only one future, or like becoming someone's wife or someone's mother. They showed me that outside our tiny village bond, there was a bigger world, and that gave me like ambitions, curiosity, and permission to imagine a life beyond the sweep. But now in Vietnam, there are also a strong social layer, like being a good child, being obedient, getting good grades, like not questioning adults. And boys are encouraged to be logical, strong, and girls to be gentle and caring. It narrows your identity before you even discover it. So, and now with social media, young people compare themselves to other life and they set themselves in specific standard instead of like expanding possibility. It sometimes brings confidence even further. Like, no, I'm also the content creator on TikTok, but recently I decided to delete it. It shaped my confidence into something quiet, not loud, but intentional, and that stay with me ever since.
sometimes you have too many things, so you realize that less is more. There's so many different social media channels, right? The fact that you have to be on all of them, like because your friends are on it, right? So that can easily lead to a kind of burnout. I think it is really important for us to be able to step back and then really think, how to be selective, which platform we should use that going to benefit us. I think one of the reasons why we have this podcast today is because, we have a lot of gender inequalities problems that haven't really been solved today. I went through the World Inequality Report 2026, and that has been just published very recently. It is found that globally, women capture just over a quarter of total labor income, a share that has barely shifted since 1990. So with that many years have come with so many things happening in the world, that still happen today, right? And women persistently receive lower labor income than men everywhere. So across the board in every regions in the world. The next one, which is very interesting, is after including domestic labor, women earn only 32% of men's hourly income. Women works more hours than men per week. All of those stats, that is telling me, even though our world has been developing a lot with a lot of things happening at the moment, AI, technology, all sort of stuff, right? That is still a very big things happening at the moment. And I think, Claire, from your own experience as well as a leader, and you're working with a lot of like executive at the moment, you probably heard so many times the fact that women are underrepresented everywhere across the board, right? What you have seen from your own experience in terms of the societal stereotypes, what are the things that you usually hear, as a woman? So for me, I think there's working for big organizations give me the opportunity to hear a lot of things. Obviously, luckily, none of these has happened to me, but I've heard a lot of things like, women are emotional, men are more rational. If a woman's are too ambitious, so in Korea, for example, then she's, seen as intimidating.
I know, Claire. The face Claire just pulled. I was in a charity shop of all places, and I got into a conversation with two women and a man about your age, Thao and Amelia. And I confessed that when I was growing up, I don't know about you, Claire, but while I knew I did not have equality, I felt like we were growing up at a time where I thought I might see it in my lifetime. And this was about 3 months ago. I was in this charity shop and one of the girls was saying something terrible had happened to her at work. And I cried because it hit me. I'm not going to see it in my lifetime. And that she was moved, that I was upset for her. And I explained what had just hit me, that in many ways, I think it's harder, Thao and Amelia, for your generation, because when we were growing up, we were at least allowed to say, we don't have equality, we need to have equality. That would be right. I think you are starting your adult lives at a time where you have to pretend you have it, even though all the science, all the facts show that you do not. And at the same time as having noisy people, usually men, but it's not all men. I don't mean it's not all men. It's definitely not all men. Love men, smash the patriarchy. I mean, it's not it's not only men saying this. You are hearing social commentators asking if you've ruined the workplace with your womanness, and if you have too much equality, if we're destroying the family. At least when Claire and I were your age, without equality, we were allowed to say we should have it, and not having it is wrong. Now I feel like you ladies have to pretend that you have it right and that the playing field is even, and be grateful when actually it isn't, and it hasn't got any better at all. And that makes me, you can probably tell, that makes me properly furious. And I had ended up having this conversation saying, I feel like my role now is to bear testimony for younger women, to say, no, you're right. You don't have it. It's not fair. welcome to the patriarchy. You're not crazy. It's insane. It is real. I thought I'd see the end of it in my lifetime. I clearly won't. Can I hold your coat? Because I'm tired. Can I pass you the baton? Is there anything I can do? Because actually, we have to have it. And if it's not going to be in my lifetime, I need it to be in yours, ladies. I need it to be in my son's because it will be better for him too. It isn't good for men either. Amelia, what you were saying about how women must be gentle and how what you were saying about how men, they're stable and rational and we're emotional. How awful as well for men to be told they're not allowed the full gamut of emotions. I mean, it's not good for them that they have no pressure upon them to become emotionally literate. That there's a loneliness and a men's mental health crisis. Perhaps if they were allowed to be more emotional, that wouldn't be happening. Perhaps they would be more well.
We're living in a world where a lot of occasions where men are not allowed to show, because for men, showing their emotions means that they are weak, right? Not many environments or workplace that are, welcome men to show their emotions. Or sometimes they just their internal belief because they have seen that somewhere else. So they just have that internal belief. So they wouldn't behave it that way.
Many people couldn't understand why a woman surrounded by armed men was smiling and saying, I'm not angry with you guys. But you ask almost any woman why she was doing that shortly before she was murdered, and she was smiling because that's what we do to protect ourselves. We're not allowed to be furious. And that's a real shame for me because I am beautiful when I'm angry.
Bet you are. Well, I think, listen, I'm forever an optimist, okay? So let me show you my experience because I don't actually think it's been that bad, okay? Let me share with you an old boss that I had, a bit older than myself. And in terms of how he managed people, what I realized that whilst I was under his management is he would ask me to communicate difficult conversations to members of his team. So they were equal in terms of seniority to myself. But because he couldn't communicate with them in terms of a difficult conversation, he would ask me to do so. Now, at the time, I thought it was a bit unusual because I thought this doesn't seem overly, comfortable, sort of having this conversation when he should be having the conversation with that person. However, I also took it as a bit of a compliment because I thought he's seen a strength in me as a good communicator. And this particular member, a colleague of mine, she wasn't challenging, but she was a bit difficult to talk to, but all you needed to do was to flex your style to be able to get the best out of that person, which him as a leader, he couldn't do. So he was very much given up. Please just sort that out, Claire. And I would say in my recent experience, I've never had a male-dominated environment. It's been very, very equal. I haven't had any experience at all in gender struggle with equal pay. This is how I go about life, okay? I can only change what I'm in control of. So if I'm going for a job at Chanel, I get there because I've got there on my own merit, okay? I've worked hard, had a direction, got a goal, and that's the direction I'm heading in. When it comes to negotiating my contract, that's all down to me. Okay, so I do my own due diligence. I see what the market's saying, what people of a similar position in the same market are getting paid. So I do my own due diligence, so I can make a very clear choice about how I'm going to be negotiating. I have no visibility of what a male colleague might be earning, but if I come to that negotiation and I feel happy with that, then that's all I'm going to do. We don't have visibility. Whatever you hear from your colleagues in the staff room, it could just be chit chat. You don't know what it's all about. So I have no experience of that at all. So, I mean, my advice to any woman would be negotiate. Don't be scared to negotiate. And this episode is all about knowing your worth, right? So I am going to get paid what I want. I never take the first offer. If anyone's listening, I never go for that. I'm always going to go high. And when I negotiate, I'm happy because that's what I've chosen. That's the decision that I've come to. I don't look left. I don't look right. So you really, ladies, we are in charge of our own destiny. So go out there, and ask and get what you're worth. Okay? Because we're not getting there, we're not getting to the top with lipstick, brushed hair, nice outfit. We're getting to the top with brains, with intelligence, with visibility and presence, and a bloody amazing skill set. That's it.
Bang on. I love that, Claire. And actually, I think that's really nicely lead to kind of like the second question that I was thinking of, that about glass ceiling. That is the topic that's been going on for ages, right? But to your point, Claire, I think I've got a very similar experience as well, where I was very lucky to be in an environment where people treat gender equalities seriously. And even though like it's tech industry, male dominated industry, and I'm like an Asian woman working in the company, and there are so many, other women from different, places in the world. However, like I still got promoted pretty quick compared to a lot of others, and I got the support from all of my managers. I think that really comes down to, number one, you, as you said, Claire, you need to know your worth, you need to know your skills, you need to be really, really good at something, right? Then the results will show itself. The second thing is you are in the right environment where people really support women, really support each other. And third thing is you have a supportive boss like you had, Claire. Similarly, I had an amazing one as well, and a lot others, like the whole network, other company, and that really helped you to thrive.
Well, okay, you could have a boss. So this is interesting. So I had a woman boss one time, okay? And she was the one that stunted my growth because of competitiveness, because I would overshadow her. So this is a really fantastic topic, and I don't want to go too hard on sort of male and female or whatever gender we want to call ourselves, but women sometimes, they still, their sisterhood's not there. And I had a bloody awful woman boss actually, but you know what I did? It just made me dig my heels in and just navigate it a different way, and I did. So I think also going back to your point, if we have a choice as well of who we want to work for. Okay, what is the organization about? What's their values? What are their standards? How do we align with them? And I think that's crucial in identifying that in yourself, okay, for many, many reasons, for so many different areas of your life, not only for your work, but for your relationships, for the home that you want to live in. These are all setting your boundaries and standards. When I went my last job at Chanel, I was sitting there, I was interviewed 5 times with 5 different people. And I was asking myself this question, am I comfortable working for this person? Is this person going to get the best out of me? And I just really can't believe I was asking myself that question. But every person that I had in those 5 different interviews, 5 different characters, 5 different positions, I was like, yeah, oh, yeah, speak my language. Because then you've got a fantastic symphony. It's a great orchestra. You've got great personalities, great characters. You're all bringing something to it, and you're speaking from a growth mindset. But if you're sat in a boardroom with a load of old farts, I don't want to be in that boardroom. I want to be in a boardroom where there's a mixture of age groups, genders, because we've all got something to bring to that pot. And that's success.
After hearing your sharing, I'm very wish one day I can work in UK workplace when everything be treated equally. Because in Vietnam, I work in technology, very male dominated industry, and about gender equalities. I've heard a lot. It not the written post in Thread City, but it happened to someone very close to me. A lot of close friend of mine were interviewed for technical roles at very well-known technology company in Vietnam, and their interview start normally, skill, past experience, team culture, but then the hiring manager asked that, are you married? She said no, and then follow-up questions at, do you plan to have children soon? And in another interview for a different company, she was directly asked whether she had kids, because in some technology environments, being available anytime or working late at night is treated as normal, so almost like a requirement. She later found out indirectly that candidates who were married or had children were filtered out because the company feared maternity leave and reduced availability and family distraction. None of this was about her skill, but because she was more than qualified. It was about like assumption. And it is not the isolated incident. Did he how bias operate in real life, quietly an interview room through questions that are not illegal yet in many countries, but are deeply harmful. So it sent a message that women have to like choose between have a family or having a career. So that motherhood is an inconvenience instead of normal part of life. Yeah.
Men deserve to spend time with their children. An assumption
Yeah.
that only the woman who, when we have a family, will want to will have to go and get a sick child from school. That's not good for men either.
No,
I
that
mean,
is something to do with the culture, I think. Well, now in today's world, right? Obviously things have changed because people now they have the news perspective. Men's now they start taking care of the kids with their wives as well, and also I think because nowadays women in developing countries, for example, right now we are more conscious of our worth, and then we are more confident and more vocal, and we feel more comfortable in asking our husband to help out,
well, like the
make
words that you
money.
chose, Thao, you said asking our husbands to help out. No,
Exactly.
there should be no asking. You're not the executive parent. It's a 50-50 deal. You
But
both make the babies. They're not helping, they're parenting.
yeah, but Helen, in my relationship with my husband, I still took the role on as everything. I not only was the main primary carer of the children, I was also working full time. I don't know how the hell I bloody did it. Earlier
It
we talked
makes me
about.
think of Ginger Rogers, Claire. The golden age of Hollywood, Fred Astaire, Ginger Rogers, beautiful dances. And she said, I did everything he did, but backwards wearing high heels.
Yeah.
I do just need to say, in case my husband or partner watch this, I live in a family where the parenting is entirely equal.
Great.
My I was an elected member, so I worked in local politics for a few years. And actually, to secure that role, there's a big election. It's horrible, like a popularity contest. And my husband took about 4 months off, I think, from our business so he could support me to
That's
get
amazing.
elected.
That's amazing,
From the
Helen.
very beginning, 50-50, and a combination of luck and some very shrewd choosing.
In Western countries, it's the norm, right? Where we share 50-50. Well, it also
Mm.
depends on the relationships as
I
well.
don't think it is. I think
Uh,
still the majority of the
yeah,
weight is falling on women. This
Is
is
yeah,
it?
one of these places where I think it's unfair now because you're meant to pretend it's even and
yeah.
it isn't. And I would
Mm,
that's a piece of advice I'd give younger women when if you decide if because there are so many ways to have a beautiful, valid life and make a contribution, even if it's just to yourself, that are entirely valid for women that don't involve having children if that's not something you want. If it is, that would be the main thing I would be asking myself. Will this man expect me to be the primary parent? Because if he thinks I've got some kind of, ovary tax I'm going to pay, where because I'm the woman, I'm going to do more parenting, I would suggest he is not the man to make a baby with.
Yeah,
mm,
I think it's such an important question, Helen. I think when you're younger, I mean, gosh, I met my ex-husband when I was 19 and got married at 22. So, and he was older than me, so we're talking about even another generation. So that's another conversation in itself. But I did take on that kind of role because I also have a very nurturing side. So it's very
mm,
natural for me to be like that. However, I should have had that conversation with him because
mm.
and this is very different. So I have a younger brother who is in a very different dynamic. Is him and his partner's 50-50, and it works so much better because it's a partnership. And when I go into and my next relationship, but that's a question that I'm still going to be asking, even though I'm not going to be having children, but it's still going to be, I want a partnership. It makes things less, it makes things, there's no
Fair.
huge, yeah, it's just better. You're sharing your
Fair.
life.
Amelia, it sounds like your parents had an age gap, but still, you seem to have received some pretty empowering messages about who
Yeah.
you were allowed to be in your woman body.
In my families, the situation is quite different because my father is the mechanical engineer. So my father had to go away 1 month for work. So I spend most of times and with my mother, and she also like the main person like grow me up, and I spend most of time with my mother.
Yeah.
I mean, it means it also depends on the nature of work as well, right? Like also who is the one that the child, can easily get along with, because this is also something to do with the characteristic as well, right? So some people, well, they are good people, but they are not good listeners.
I would really advise any young woman, do not start a family with someone if you don't think they'll be a good nurturing parent, because you are just making a job of work for yourself for the whole rest of your life.
This definitely an advice that usually we don't get to hear in the previous generation. I think in the past it was, pretty much simple. Like, okay, you got to this age now, you need to get married, you have a boyfriend, you have, now probably turn that relationship into a serious relationship and things like that. So we didn't really ask all of those questions, as Claire just mentioned, like she wished she asked all of those questions beforehand. So I think we like for women, and especially for young women, if they're looking for a partner or a husband, I think there's a list of key questions I think they need to ask, their boyfriends in advance before making the decision to get married.
Also yourselves, because some of the things that we're attracted to are not very healthy for us.
Right. Helen, just switching back to what Amelia said at the start, identity. This is all about knowing yourself in every sort of aspect. That's what it is. And if you know yourself, what's going to make you fundamentally happy and emotionally stable and help you grow, you need to put that on a list and then find that man that's got a woman, whoever you want, to match it. And then you should be okay. It should be good to go.
Your most important relationship, apart from, possibly if you have children, but even then, if you do a good job of parenting, they leave you and they go and get on with their own lives. Your most important relationship is with yourself. And actually, I feel like something that happened accidentally for me that I am now so grateful for is where I had such a strong personality, I naturally repelled people who would not be good, of both genders, who would not be good for me in a relationship, because I naturally repelled people who thought I should be soft and gentle by really not being. And if a man wanted a new mummy instead of a girlfriend and wife, I would not be the right one for him. So if you focus on yourself, and that sounds selfish, but it's really not, because clear is kind, right? Is that something we were all told in therapy? Clear is kind. If we make it clear who we are, people will choose us that we're compatible with.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We're not making.
I love that. So when you become a mom, and then I think at that time, usually once you've got a child, it tend to be also kind of the time where you need to move up the ladder in your careers as well, because usually if we say in general, women tend to, give birth around when they are 30s or so, and then that is also when they are also reach like the middle management level in their career, or even for some people they're going to reach like the leadership levels as well. From your own experience, how do you balance, among being a mom, being, a manager in your organizations, and spending time for yourself as well? And also the underlying layer is also happening at the same time is the fact that your hormone changes after giving birth.
I don't know. I don't know how. Isn't
my reaction true? Again, Claire, it's the same as yours, like hysterical laughter.
Yeah, I know. Like also, like I'm a crazy woman. Why did I make those choices?
Having a baby really tanked my career, and I had a massively supportive spouse. We did have, my little boy is really well now, but when he was born, he was allergic to everything. So he was allergic to dairy, soya, all sorts of other proteins and a bunch of vegetables. And it transpired the best way for him to not be constantly an allergy and then fall very ill would be to do extended breastfeeding. And no matter how supportive my husband was, that was definitely going to be easier for me. And it is incredibly hard to express milk and go back to work. So despite the fact he'd have been willing to stay home and do the parenting, it really wasn't up for debate. And as is so often the way at that time, he also earned slightly more than me, so it made sense. And I'm not going to lie, it was really difficult to get back into the swing of things afterwards. And it wasn't just difficult because you've been on this ladder and you've been climbing up it dutifully. And actually, I was lucky. I had some opportunities with people who really passionately felt women should be able to get back into the workplace and valued some of my parenting experience. So I did have opportunities, I did have supportive bosses, but it was also a feeling of, it really knocks your confidence. It's surprising how do you remember what it was like when we all had to go indoors in 2020?
Yes,
Do you
yeah.
remember how frightening it was then going back out into the world?
Mm,
A little bit like that.
Yeah.
Trying to put your suit back on and go back into, it's a little bit like when we all emerged. Sort of, you can't quite remember how it all works, but you can do it.
Obviously, when you have a baby, he or she is your priority, right? So I think I've come across a few kind of concern from my own friends that they're in their early 30s now, where they start building their family, and they are having to decide, is that now if I have kids, that would have an impact on my career. I will not be able to climb up the ladder. It won't take me a few years. I need to step back. I need to sacrifice my career to have a kid. And also another thing is, okay, once I've, give birth and it's a time for me to come back to work, that would have certain difficulty and challenges for me to be back to work and catch up with things, after over like 9 months to a year of being, in maternity leave. Claire, from your experience working with your clients and, working with a lot of executives who are in leadership roles, what was the common things that usually happen, and what is your view on that?
Okay, I've got lots of different experiences about this. I'll just talk briefly about my one. So I have my children young, so 26, 28, which seems quite young nowadays. I was very real. There were moments through my career that I had to pause, and I paused, which didn't mean I stopped working. It just meant I paused because I wanted to enjoy. I wanted to be present being a mother. And I didn't want to put my children into childcare. I wanted to be a mother, very present, very conscious, and enjoy the children. When the boys were 6 and 3, I set up my own business. I set up my own business with a business partner whose dynamics were exactly the same as mine. So we had the same values and we were aligned. So it worked, okay, in terms of childcare and our values and our business. Perfect. And then I had a short spell, but again, I was fortunate because my ex-husband at the time was a good financial provider. So I had 2 years where I wasn't working and I was very present in the boy's life. But that was never going to stop me. I never for a moment thought, oh my gosh, I'm not going to be able to climb the corporate ladder, or, things are slipping away. I have no regrets at all in my timeline. I became very successful, I would say, from 36 onwards. 36 to 50 to where I am today, I kind of almost flipping soared. But that was because of my mindset. Now, there was a period when I did progress very, very quickly, multiple promotions, before I went to Chanel, this was, where I was spinning every single plate. And I look back now and I was utterly exhausted. Now, the reason why that was is because I had huge commitments with my children. So they were both in professional soccer schools. So that was a big commitment after work, taking them to football training 5 times a week. On top of that, I was a manager leading a team. I was a project manager as well. And I liked things done at a certain, I pride myself on giving everything I've got in every area of my life, in being a mother, being a wife, being a daughter, and being an employee. So that really is all down to myself, isn't it? Like your burnout is down to you. I never once had a boss saying, get in, you're going home at this time. I mean, I'd already been in the office for like 10, 11 hours, but it was really down to me. And I think if I gave any advice to anyone younger than myself now, was just to be very present and be aware of that, because sometimes you don't realize you're in that kind of, you're swirling around and you're going into that vortex and everything's just happening and you just keep going. So that's what I would just say is when you're feeling, that pressure or that feeling of being overwhelmed, you really need to take yourself away from it for a moment and just try and reset. Whether that means, having, an afternoon to yourself. We talked earlier about self-care. It's just being self-aware of yourself. How am I feeling? And you touched upon hormones. Now, this was massive for me, and I didn't even realize. So, for all of my adult life, I had endometriosis. And when I had my periods, I would have to get up early. I think we've spoken before about this, and we've talked about wellness and fitness. I'd have to set my alarm clock at 4 a.m. to take a strong painkiller, to be able to get up at 6 a.m., to shower, get the kids ready for school, and go to work because I was in excruciating pain. I didn't know at that all those years ago about endometriosis, and I just thought I was having a bad period. So hormones played a huge part on me, actually. And I remember times when I'd be very, very sharp, and I could be very sharp in the workplace as well. But probably because I was overwhelmed with all the pressure I put on myself as a mother and being a manager, but also because of my endometriosis was having such a chaotic hormonal effect on my body. Again, I can reflect on all of this and think, bloody hell, how did I do it? But I did do it. But I want to now encourage women to really pause and just be self-aware. That's all it is, being self-aware. You can, I'm telling you now, you can have it all. You definitely can, but it's to be able to monitor yourself and make sure that you're still being good to yourself, because if you're not, then not only are you going to suffer, your work's going to suffer, your family life's going to suffer. So that's it. I don't think there's anything holding you back. So you're like people who are saying in their early 30s, should I have a baby? How's it going to change my life? Do you know what? Where there's a will, there's a way. And if you want to succeed, if you want to go to the top, absolutely, you can achieve it. I wholeheartedly believe that in anybody. If you've got that grit, determination, resilience, you can make it. And be happy. My goodness.
Be
Don't
happy,
forget.
yes.
Think of happiness as much as you can.
I
I
think
think
once you,
I love
yeah,
everything that, well, all of you've said this evening, because it's been so inspiring how much energy everyone's bringing, despite right at the beginning, all of us acknowledging some definite adversity. And I think it's important to remember adversity doesn't have to lead to failure. I worked with coaching an elderly gentleman who had been, I believe, a nuclear physicist, but he wouldn't, no, a nuclear engineer. He wouldn't say exactly what he'd done. So I wonder if he'd ever had to sign an Official Secrets Act. And he said he didn't often work with women. It was still very male dominated. He worked a lot with the military, but that some of the best commanders he did work with were women. And he had a fiercely intelligent, very clever wife. And he said, you know what I've noticed, Helen? I've noticed that actually often women have to be better at a job and better at communicating. And they have to have the very best skills if they're going to turn up in this environment, because it probably would have been easier when I was at work, he said, for a man to get that job. So if she was there, she was probably at the top of her game. And he said, we men, we've got to watch it, because if we keep making life so difficult for you and you all keep succeeding anyway, you're going to be like the superhumans. And I think I took real inspiration from that. You can keep bringing this adversity and we'll keep succeeding anyway.
Yeah, we're resilient as hell.
well, we can give birth. Come on. What else can we do?
Do you know what? Is it all right just to add one more thing? I really want to also say to younger women, it's all right if you don't want to do that. I feel so much joy that I had a child. And I also think it's really important that we let women choose whether that's the ambition they have. Because I definitely was raised thinking that a successful life would have to include a husband and and children, and that I wouldn't have achieved a whole and complete life without those things. But actually, I meet women every day who've made different choices and make an amazing contribution to the world. So I just wanted to say, keep that door open. Only have babies because you want to and not because it's on the list.
Yeah, it's choices. And what I will say, just from my own experience of endometriosis, I would say that if you are suffering with something like that, give yourself the opportunity, go and get your eggs frozen. That's what I would say.
Claire, I love your point about pause and, be very clear about your self-identity. And I think this works for women at all ages. So even though you are a young woman or later down in life, once you have experienced a lot in life and you're looking for a change, for example, a change in career or a change in whatever other things is, just pause and then try to really figure out what is your identity or your new identity, if that is something like a new person that you want to become. I think that is the most important thing, and that is the North Stars that will help you to live your best life. Thank you so much all for your time today. I really appreciate it, and I'm sure we talk about a lot of useful insights and topics. And thank you guys for watching. This has been the Journey Not Real Talk. See you next time.